Hello, it's Dave O'Neill here to share a new true crime, well, sort of, podcast with you that I've made with a regular co-host of The Debrief, Mr. Bradford Oakes. We all know Oaksy. It's called Slippery Slope. You can listen here or search for it in your podcast app. It's a story of jealousy, aspiration, international relations taking place mostly in Queensland's remote north-central town of Mount Isa. Get the 4 episodes of Slippery Slope here every Wednesday or search for it in your podcast app. Okay, hope you enjoy it. Here is episode 1. Mount Isa, one of the most remote places in Australia, nay the world. Smack bang in the middle of Queensland. They had it all. Pubs, cowboys, rodeo, a 24-hour Macca's, a massive mine, but something was missing.
She said, I've got to say, they don't have real problems. You got problems.
Denise said, what the fuck is that?
Someone was screaming, lizard, crocodile,
And a waterslide just made sense.
Yep, it was made in Turkey, and we got a lot of flack off that too.
There was a bit of an issue in the Suez Canal.
Like, I thought everyone was having a crack.
They're delaying it on purpose and they're just trying to get it in after the election.
Oh, okay. Of course, this has happened to us in Mount Isa. What else would happen?
Slippery Slope, a true crime podcast about Mount Isa and the missing waterslide with Dave O'Neill and Brad Oakes.
Well, hello and welcome to our podcast. I'm Dave O'Neill.
Hi, I'm Brad Oakes.
Now, Brad, tell everyone how we came across the story of Mount Isa and the missing waterslide.
Well, last year we were touring in northern Queensland. We were in Cairns and then we flew to Mount Isa and we were picked up by a charming person from the Mount Isa Council.
Erica,
she drove us around, showed us some very interesting sights and then told us this wonderful tale.
now, had you been to Mount Isa before?
No, I'd never been there.
Yeah, and what was your first impression?
Is it in Australia?
Yeah.
It's a long way.
It's very isolated. For people that don't know, it's in the middle of Queensland. It's a huge mining town.
It's actually in Queensland, but it's closer to Darwin than it is to Brisbane.
Yeah, that's
it's
right.
State capital.
I'd been there a few times. I hosted their 100-year celebration, and I've done a gig in Julia Creek. I always really liked Mount Isa because it's very much a working town as opposed to a FIFO town. Most people live there, and most people work in the mine or in the surrounding industries in the mine, I suppose.
Well, and I think when I look at you, I think Western Queensland.
Yeah.
You know, you're like a stockman.
So we heard of this story, and we thought that is a great story, and so returned to Mount Isa, interviewed people. We're going to cover the whole story over this podcast.
I'll just point out too that we didn't turn to each other and go, this is a great story. It was a couple of weeks later after we got back. I said to you, I'm just fascinated by that story. You went, me too.
Yeah, and we both been to our rooms in Mount Isa and individually Googled and could find nothing about it.
Yeah.
There was nothing about this water slide. So we thought, this is a great story. Well, I mean, it's interesting. People that live there have an opinion on Mount Isa, obviously. Let's hear from Kim Cogho. She's the sister mayor. She's been on council forever. Kim, what's your description of Mount Isa?
Hard, rugged, hot.
Yep, that's a very quick summation, but that kind of does sum it up. I think it is a hard place to live, Brad.
In terms of hard, it was 31 degrees when we were in Cairns the day before.
Yeah.
But that's humid heat.
Yeah.
And then when we landed at 8:30 in the morning in Mount Isa, it was already 31 degrees.
Yeah.
That's more like pizza oven heat.
Yeah, it was like a pizza oven, and it got hotter and hotter. Danielle Slade's also, she was on the council. She was a mayor. I met her when I hosted the 100-year celebration. She's not a councillor anymore, growing up in Mount Isa.
It was never my intention to stay here. It grows on you without you realising. When I left school, I was out of here. There's no doubt about it. And I met people who not just become friends, but have become lifelong friends, and people who would, bury a body for you, basically. These people, we've grown up together, and I can't explain that sort of feeling of community that Mount Isa has. And maybe it's because we're so isolated.
Of course, this area, and I didn't know this until I went there, Rob Catter is the local member for the state parliament. Now, that's Bob Catter's son. Did you
Yeah.
know he had a son?
I knew he had a son. I loved the fact that the differential is just, well, Bob Catter, who's a very colourful Australian federal
He's
politician.
been there forever, too, in parliament.
He has been around and is a very strong advocate for Northern Queensland.
Yeah.
To differentiate between his colourful personality, his son is Rob
Yeah.
rather than Bob.
Yeah, that's so funny.
And
it's just one letter the difference between Rob and Bob.
Yeah, it just clears it up straight away.
For people that don't know who Bob Catter is, this is his famous quote on the news when I think they were talking about gay marriage, weren't they?
It was. It's about the referendum.
Yeah, and just hear how it takes a turn. It's only 20 seconds, but this will sum up Bob Catter.
People are entitled to their sexual proclivities. You know, I mean, let there be 1,000 blossoms bloom as far as I'm concerned. You know, but I ain't spending any time on it because in the meantime, every 3 months, a person is torn to pieces by a crocodile in North Queensland.
There we go. Torn to pieces by a crocodile.
Do yourself a favour too. If you want to Google that, just type in Bob Catter crocodiles and you will see it's a 20-second clip. His face change halfway through that.
It's unbelievable, and that has become famous around the world. But that's not Rob Catter.
No, Rob's a lot more sedate.
Rob Catter actually lives in Mount Isa. He's got an office there. He's got a house there. He's got a family there.
He's a member for that area.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
which must be a very big state electorate.
He's got a plane that he flies around.
Yeah.
Which he famously didn't put the landing thing down and skidded on the tarmac.
I do that all the time. Yeah.
In your plane. Let's hear from Rob Catter.
Mount Isa is a diamond in the rough. It's very hard to see its beauty and its value and character on the surface, but it doesn't. When you open it up and get inside, it's great and gets hold of you. It's hard to leave.
And he sounds a bit like Bob, a little bit. There is that real phenomenon though where people come, Brad, and they just stay.
Yeah.
Did you have any desire to stay?
No, it was a bit too hot for me, given that we did a gig there. That I'd pretty much shot my bolt there. You know, a lot of the people from the region were there. So after that, it's pretty much I'll just be picking up papers.
Yeah.
For something to do.
Yeah, there's no gigs there, basically, is what you're saying.
No, but I could see, like, you remember how the sunsets were absolutely beautiful and striking. It had that kind of thing too, which I think it might be proximate to a desert. And so it has that nighttime, that stillness, which is, you know, really kind of commensurate with the Australian outback.
Yeah. It is a desert, isn't it? That's the desert.
I think it is, yeah.
I'm pretty sure it's the desert. Let's hear a bit more from Rob Catter, talking about how it's very hard to leave the place.
For me, I'm a good working example. I came out with a 2 or 3 year plan 21 years ago thinking, yeah, just make some money. And then you start to go, well, what am I going to improve if I go back to the coast? If I go back to what am I going to improve? Because I've got a good friendship base here, I've got a good house, I've got a good job, I've got enough money to holiday at the end of the year. I think a lot of people have that set in their head, like I've got to get back to Noosa or I've got to get back to Brisbane, Gold Coast. And then you start to say, well, why? You know, what was better in your life there? And it's really interesting the amount of people that move away. And I don't want to say with their tail between their legs, but it's usually sort of in a good way. They come out and say, you know what, I couldn't replicate the same friendships and community that I had here.
The thing about Mount Isa that no one's mentioned yet is the mine. It is quite remarkable to go to a mining town where the mine is right there in the middle of the town. Right there.
Yeah, I've been to Kalgoorlie and the mine's outside of Kalgoorlie.
That's a pit too, isn't it?
Yeah, and, you know, of course, growing up in Victoria, there's the open cut mine in the Gippsland region around Morwell, your lawn.
Yeah.
And that's out of town, but this is really striking. It's just, in fact, the town, I believe, is divided into mine side and town side.
Yes. Yeah, and mine side used to be a bit posh, I believe, back in the day.
Of course it would be posh, because if you live in the mine side, you go, I'll just grab some rubies from my mine.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because when I first went there, I could not believe I could look out in the motel. I heard a horn blasting, and it was the mine. I looked out the motel window, and there it was, right there.
Yeah.
So first impressions are really interesting with Mount Isa. Let's hear from Cogho again, the councillor, talking about someone's first impression.
Tell you this story. A fella come into Mount Isa, never been to Mount Isa in his life. He went to Townies Rugby League Club. He was drinking there all afternoon, and I had to take him. He was staying at the Barclay Hotel. So I was taking him to the Barclay Hotel, and I was going across the big bridge. And at night, when the mines is lit up, it looks like a ship liner. And I remember we were going across the big bridge, and he was talking, and next minute he looked and he said, "What the fuck is that?" And I said, "What are you talking about?" Because I didn't know what he was going on about. And he was in the car horrified. And I said, "What are you?" He said, "What's that?" And I said, "It's the mine." And he was absolutely astounded. He said, "But it's right there." And I said, "Yeah." So we don't know anything different. But for people coming into Mount Isa, I mean, you drive down the Barclay Highway and, you know, you go up Railway Avenue and there's this mine, like the whole mine is there. Like it's unheard of because all other places in Australia, the mine's there, but the town's away. But you go back to when it was discovered, I mean, you had to be right near the mine. So you used to have mine side and town side.
The mine was first and then Mount Isa. Do you know how it was discovered? How Mount Isa came to be?
Look, I'm strongly paraphrasing here, so feel free to correct me. But my understanding was that there was some prospectors just moving through the area. One of them horses got something in its foot,
Yeah.
hoof, and they turned it over, and it was a big lump of insert precious metal
Right.
here, which begs the question because we talk about how the town got to be called Mount Isa. Well, I think it should have been named after that horse.
Yeah.
Like
Nelly.
Mount Trigger.
Mount Nelly. Because, of course, the indigenous people were there first.
Of course, yeah.
And they're part of Mount Isa, of course. And it used to be, it was known for what sort of thing?
I believe it was known as a trading area. It was well known for the quality of the stone axes that were made in the region, right? Which, again, would point towards them using really good minerals.
The materials.
Yeah.
Yeah, that they now mine.
Minerals and ores.
Cogho seems to know what she's talking about when it comes to the history of Mount Isa.
So the story goes, the horse got a rock thing in his hoof and he saw it. A lot of them were prospectors at the time. And from there, like all the prospectors come out, but John Campbell Miles laid claim to it first. And there's a long history of miners coming here. So I just know that my great-grandfather was the pioneer that discovered, was with John Campbell Miles. Then my father was a shift boss in the mines. And then, I worked in the mines.
The mine has had several owners over the years. Well, the vibe I get, current owners, is not a good relationship, I believe.
No, and I believe it started out as Mount Isa Mining.
Yes.
And for years you would see that, in the stocks pages, in
Yes.
the news pages. MIM was synonymous, it was up there with BHP. It's one of the most productive mining areas in the world in terms of its size. And it's now fallen into the hands of... what did they say? Bean counters?
Bean counters, economists. Yeah, I actually put the question to Rob Catter. Let's have a listen.
I'd say really bad. It was off the charts good when I sort of first moved here. And it was Mount Isa Mines. They used to have a Christmas party, I'm told, before my time. They had a Christmas party, and every kid in town, regardless of whether their parents worked at the mine or not, got a Christmas present. And the friends of mine, who were my age, who were part, they said, mate, they weren't little presents. They weren't a $2 chibi, like a decent bloody toy. And, they did up sports fields and, helped people into housing and helped develop housing suburbs and really invested in creating a good, livable city and keeping FIFO out and making a permanent workforce. And, Extrata came in, which was the precursor to Glencore, and it's just a completely different... There's a lot of animosity towards the mine now, I'd say, because they do it. They're just commercially focused and don't have that same community focus.
They're not mining. They're money people, aren't they, from Switzerland?
They're global commodity traders. We're one of 150 or more mines they own in the world. We're a speck in a speck of dust to them, and they work off commodity prices and they require higher returns than a lot of other mining companies do around the place. So they'll shut something down before someone else would. And
They're not miners. They're economists.
Oh, they're bankers.
Yeah, and it's, Yeah, so I think that's where the trouble is. We need a mining company to buy out Mount Isa mines. Yep.
Hello. Hey.
Sorry, I'm ringing you early, I've realised.
We've got Troy rolling from the Northwest Weekly.
How are you, Troy?
I'm not too bad.
Tell us, what's your relationship with Mount Isa? You were there when you were a younger man, is that right?
Yeah, that's right. I started my journalism cadetship in Mount Isa maybe 10, 15 years ago, and then I went off and did other things in media, and then a friend of mine started the newspaper up here again last year, and so, yeah, here I am.
Troy showed me around Mount Isa, and when he said he went off and did other things, Bradford, he worked for a very famous politician, but we're not going to interview him about that.
Right.
All right.
Did you ever think you'd go back there?
I don't know, it's one of those places where people always say they come back. It's like a boomerang sort of town. People keep coming back. So when you actually walk down the street and people remember you, they're not always surprised to see that you've come back, to be honest.
It's like a jail town where people go, oh, you've been away. Just did 5 to 7.
When I was talking to you, the relationship between Mount Isa and the mine is really interesting because they're kind of proud of the mine, aren't they?
Oh, yeah, this place is very, very pro-mining. So because it's basically a gigantic mine with a town wrapped around it in the middle of nowhere. So, I mean, the mine was here before the town as well. So if you're to be anti-mining in Mount Isa, you'd be very lonely.
And now tell us about, is part of the mine shutting down soon?
It is, yeah. So later this year, they'll have the underground section, which is actually, there's like hundreds of kilometres of underground mine there that they extract copper from. And, well, that whole section is closing down. So it's somewhere between 600 and 1,200 jobs, which is about 10% of the entire workforce in Mount Isa.
Yeah. Wow. And what's the vibe about that? That's obviously a bad thing.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's obviously, people don't like seeing the mines close. There's obviously people that think that it should stay open. There's other people that say that's what a mine does. It runs out of stuff. There's other things on the horizon, though. There's always mines being proposed out here as well. So it's not just the one Mount Isa mine. There's quite a lot of mining production all around the area, to be honest.
Has it run out of stuff, or is it an economic decision?
Depends who you ask. If you ask the company, Glencore, they'll tell you that they've basically just depleted the resource, so it's just not economical for them to get it out anymore. They're just closing it. Well, they're going to restart an open cut mine over the top of it in the next few years.
Well, that'll create more jobs, won't it?
It will, yeah. They're not as many jobs as what is currently in the underground section, but it will create new jobs. The thing is, that mine hasn't been fully sort of signed off on yet. They haven't made a final investment decision, so just have to, wait and see.
And there's a resistance to FIFO there as well, too, isn't there? Is there a concern that these jobs will be allocated to locals, or? Yeah,
well, that's always the big battle out here in any mining town, is that you get the guys that fly in and fly out, and they live in camps, or they live on accommodation, and, they don't spend, aside from sort of buying beer and playing the pokies, they don't really, commit to the town very much.
I think it was you telling me, was it Glencore who changed the shift time? So it went from 8 hours to a different 12-hour shift, was that right?
It was the previous company that owned the mine before Glencore, so Xstrata, they extended from 8 to 12-hour shifts. And if you listen to long-time locals, they'll tell you it really did take a lot of the heart out of a lot of the community organisations, particularly because, I don't know if you guys have ever worked a 12-hour shift, but you're pretty buggered by the end of it.
Hang on, Troy. You're asking two comedians if they've ever worked a 12-hour shift.
No, but
the answer's no.
We did drive to Mildura and back in 24 hours.
Back the other night. You're right. Once you finish a 12-hour shift in a physical job, you can't go to tennis or soccer practice. You're knackered.
Is that 3 shifts down to 2, or is that 2 shifts and closing down?
It's 2 shifts.
Now, but of course, with the history of the mine, when we were up there, Erica showed us the underground hospital, which was a feature in World War II. The miners built that, didn't they? My
understanding is that Northern Australia was pretty undeveloped back then. The war was used to try and, build highways, and they built airstrips and in case the Japanese invaded. So I think out here was obviously going to be a place that soldiers were going to fall back to if the Japanese ever did come down. And So they needed a hospital to be able to put injured soldiers in and all the rest of it. There's like a bunch of tunnels built into the side of a mountain out here that was a hospital.
We visited there.
Yeah, it was amazing.
Looking at the history of it too, it would have been a nice big fat juicy target for the Japanese Imperial Army, because there was, in fact, after the bombing of Darwin, I think that was an influence where they said, well, we have to have a hospital that's safe. And on top of that, there was the Brisbane line, which was basically, we will defend everything from Brisbane back, so that, you know, the people might have actually felt like they were being isolated there.
There were a lot of American soldiers in Mount Isa during the war too, and they used to get into fights with the miners and go down to the riverbank and sort it all out.
You live in Mount Isa, you work there. Talking about the lack of things for young people to do, is that an issue, you reckon?
Well, we're in the middle of nowhere, so if you don't like what Mount Isa has to offer, you don't have much else to choose from. I guess it just depends what you like to do, because we've got Lake Mundara, which is, without sounding like a tourist pamphlet, there's Lake Mundara is a pretty big, it's the water source, but they've turned into a big nice lake where people go fishing and boating and stuff, and then it's a pretty multicultural place as well, as much as people probably don't realise. So there's a lot of good restaurants and stuff as well, so I don't mind it, but I guess it just depends. You know, if you're wanting to go and see Metallica on the weekend or something, you're not going to be doing that from Mount Isa.
What an appropriate thing in a mining town.
Yeah, Metallica in Mount Isa. Hey, Troy, thanks for talking to us.
No problem.
Well, apart from all the issues with the mine, so the part of the mine's closing down, there is this whole problem with the young people and a lack of things for the kids to do, Brad.
Oh, there is, but the relationships are strong. I think Danielle was talking before. I think she said something like, people have got your back. People would bury a body for you, basically. Okay, so not a good idea in a mining town.
Yeah.
Probably a better way to get rid of it. It kind of speaks to firm friends, and Rob Catter said the same, how close these people are.
Yeah.
And so even if you don't have kids, you're concerned about the issues for the children.
Yeah, but there's lots of sporting clubs. There is a lack of things for the kids to do. Let's hear from Rob Catter.
Oh, well, it was really nice once a politician in Brisbane, a lady, had come up to me and said, Rob, I just want to say to you, I spent a few days out in a committee here in Mount Isa getting across some of the issues here, and she said, I get a lot of people through my office in Brisbane. She said, I've got to say, they don't have real problems. You got problems. So if you wanted to take, education, health, population decline, industry, risk in industry growth, and just about every metric we could say, we've got the, alcoholism, social disruption, crime. You could put a real negative slant on it, but crikey, we still all love being here.
Oh, look, and I'll speak very bluntly with you. People say, there's nothing to do, rah, rah. Well, hang on a minute, we shouldn't have to put on something for you to do. You can still, we've got a skate park here, we've got a pump track, we've got 13 parks or something, and nearly all of them have got play equipment in it. Or how about you just go get your mate and get on a bike and ride around for a little bit, not break into houses or anything, but, just ride around on your bikes. And my son especially was never without a ball in his hand. He'd kick a ball around, or him and his mates would go, and do their stuff. So I still think there's a lot to do in Mount Isa.
Cogho, yeah, well, she makes a good point. We didn't have much. We were in Melbourne, but we didn't have that much growing up as kids to entertain ourselves, did we?
No, and in fact, you talk about, just to digress, you talk about having a ball in your hand. Now, I believe in your street, there was somebody who moved out.
Oh, sure. We're talking about Johnny Furphy, who plays for the NBA now.
Yeah.
The kid that I practically raised. He lives across the road, and he used to play basketball all the time at the school, at the local clubs, and then he got signed up for the NBA.
It's the same in Central Australia. I was talking to footballer Rupert Bathiris, ex-Collingwood player, who went up and did some developmental work in the central part of the Northern Territory. And I said to him, do you think that indigenous people are better at football? And he said he felt that, and this is his opinion, he felt that it was because they have a ball in their hand from the moment they can walk.
Really?
They have a footy, or they're having a game of footy. And so that...
Because it's cheap entertainment.
It is.
Yeah.
And he said there'll be 80 kids playing, 40 on each side playing footy. I'm just really intrigued by how important a ball is.
Yeah.
He said that by the time you get to teenage years, you've seen every bounce of that ball, and it's what makes you a 10,000-hour expert.
Yeah. That's right. The theory that you need 10,000 hours of practicing your chosen field.
Yeah.
Like us in stand-up comedy. We've
Exactly.
done 10,000 hours.
And I've bounced a lot of balls.
So you've got all the sporting clubs up there. You got the footy, the cricket. They've got tennis in Mount Isa. All sorts of sports.
The body bearing club.
Yeah, the body bearing, the soccer club,
the body finding club.
They've got a great pool up there. But this,
you would hope.
Okay, a big swim centre, outdoors, an outdoor swim centre there, right near the mine. Actually, it's right next to the mine. But the thing is, the example we're about to play illustrates how bored the kids are in Mount Isa. I'll let Shae. She runs the pool there. She runs the swim centre. Let her tell the story.
A couple of years ago, we had some crocodiles in the pool as well. Had a little turtle last year also. Not that the turtle was too bad, but the crocodiles were a bit more of a feat to get out. Someone had been trapping them out at the lake and brought them in overnight and threw them over the fence, and they've gone into the water. I opened the pool as normal. It was pitch black. Spotlights were on. I did my walk around and check, but the crocodiles were obviously in the corners in the shadow early in the morning, just dormant. And then as the water started churning up, we had an aqua aerobics class on. There was music pumping and everything was going. They started to move around, and we don't know whether they wanted to join in or just escape the place fast. They looked pretty nervous and pretty scared at first, to be honest. I don't know who was more scared. A couple of people in the class started screaming and running and didn't really know what was going on at first until someone was screaming lizard, crocodile, and went from there. So we could scoop some out with the buckets. They were only little babies. Some of them were a little bit faster, and we had to get one of the ladies we know quite well from the class, actually. Her husband came down. He's a big fishing fella, and he brought cast nets, and that's how we got them.
Okay, so I just want to point out, like, good on you, Shae, and I can imagine that's a problem, but I've seen a lizard and I've seen a crocodile.
Yeah.
And we're talking a difference in metres.
Yeah.
You know?
I think they were baby crocodiles, but they were still scary, apparently.
Yeah, I know, but just they're very different. I mean, I believe that they probably were similar about 20 billion years ago.
Yes.
But they branched out.
Well, it's kind of like saying wallaby kangaroo, isn't it?
Well,
is it?
No, I felt like it's more like saying wallaby horse.
Right, okay.
That's probably what Bob Catter was talking about.
Yes.
I mean, being ripped apart over a series of days.
In the swimming pool in Mount Isa. Well, anyway, that's the thing about Mount Isa. We're getting to the water slide now because the kids are so bored, they're putting crocodiles in the pool, even though she didn't say they were kids in that quote, but she told me later they were kids that did it. Let's cross to Danielle Slade, the former mayor, and because there used to be Brad, I don't know if you know this, there used to be a water slide in Mount Isa.
No, I did not know that.
For a while, when I was a kid here, we had a water slide. It was quite a ride on my bike, to be honest, but I would ride out there, do the water slide, and have the time of my life. And of course, it was a private entity and it went broke or closed down. And the one thing that I realised as a resident, let alone the mayor, is we need more fun things for kids to do, especially the older kids. You know, we're talking youth crime and lots of things happening. You need to keep these kids engaged, lots of fun things to do. A water slide just made sense, you know.
There we have it. Someone has suggested a water slide for Mount Isa. So we get to the start of the story, Brad.
All right, and so they didn't have that water slide, you know, the ones we had with kids where you just had...
slip and slide.
Yeah, a big bit of plastic.
Dad would put tent pegs in, the plastic, and also it'd be near the road. We used to do one on the nature strip, and you could often go into the driveway or the road.
And if you put a little bit of detergent on it, and if you slid onto that couch grass, there was next year's skin for it. Yes.
So we've come to the end of the first episode. So Mount Isa, they're going to get a water slide. Well, it's been proposed, but there's quite a few hurdles to cover, and an incident occurs.
Yeah, you don't just go and buy one at Clark Rubber.
No, you don't. It's a whole thing. Good intentions. Look, listen to next week because something goes wrong.
Queensland government had gone to all the mines in Queensland and said, we want some money from you.
Special meeting of Mount Isa City Council. It was my idea for the water slide, but it's not big enough.
Slippery Slope, a true crime podcast about Mount Isa and the missing water slide with Dave O'Neill and Brad Oakes.
Slippery Slope is written and hosted by Dave O'Neill and Brad Oakes. Original music created by Itinerant Productions. Check out their website, there's some great stuff there, www.itinerantproduction.com. Editing by Courtney Carthy, published by Nearly Media. Thank you to all the guests involved in the making of Slippery Slope. In this episode, Kim Coughlin, Danielle Slade, Troy Rowling, Rob Catter and Shae Donovan at the pool. Find more information in the episode notes or at nearly.com.au. And thanks to the people of Mount Isa.